fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery with your hosts, Eric Shapiro, David North Martino, John Copenhaver, and Al Warren. Heard on KCAW 106.5 FM Los Angeles,
102.3 FM Riverside,
and 105.0 AM Palm Springs.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery. I am Al Warren. Mr. Joe Goldberg is here to save the day.
I'm here for you, Al. I'm spending more time with you than my wife. She's getting jealous.
Well, she should look out.
She should be, right?
Yeah, she should be. You know, handsome, desirable man.
Like you.
Like you. Yeah, and how old are you now? 62?
Exactly. Good guess.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, I don't date seniors.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm now on the discount menu in many restaurants now. That's a new world.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. A lot of the drugstores too, you know, 55 and older, and you get the 20% off. You know, I've got them logged in my phone, so I know what day it's 20% off.
Yeah, I just signed up for something yesterday. It's for my birthday. I find myself scrolling back. It takes me a while to scroll back to 1960. Yeah, I might as well just get something to drink while I'm going from 2020 to 1960.
Yeah. They just don't think there's anyone alive that old. You know, happens a lot. So, well, let's see. Now, today we are talking mystery, and we've got a new writer, debutante. So, Miss Alex Kenna, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Alex, so you've written a book. Came out December 6th, and it's called What Meets the Eye, a Mystery. So, I have to ask you, what made you decide to write this book?
Well, to be honest, I was, during the pandemic, I had a relatively high-risk pregnancy and was pretty much stuck at home with nothing to do except watch lots of TV and let my imagination run wild. So that kind of got me thinking, and I sort of decided to try my hand at it. And at the same time, my husband and I were binging this really nerdy show called Fake or Fortune, where British people try to figure out whether they have a great masterpiece or whether they have just a fake. And then I had forgery on the brain and tried to see if I could write a book along those topics.
Well, but it's quite a bit of work to do a book. Like, put it all together, write it, get it edited, published, and the whole thing. So what actually made you do that? Other than, you're sitting there watching some wild show and you kind of get some cool ideas in your head and stuff like that. But didn't you feel a little bit scared?
Not really. I actually wrote another book that's not published before this one. And I think, because I went to art school, I think starting out wasn't as scary for me as a lot of writers, because I had spent so many years looking at a blank canvas and was kind of used to, the fact that, when you're making a painting, it looks pretty terrible for a long period of time until you kind of get it polished. So I think I wasn't that intimidated about kind of the starting process. And then once I got started, I didn't put a lot of pressure on myself to make it perfect in one go. I kind of knew I'd be coming back and finessing it a lot. So yeah, that was kind of the approach I took.
Wow. And you're pretty happy with how it turned out, obviously.
There's obviously when you always think of little tiny things and you're like, oh, that word, I should have used a synonym. But, other than the nitpicking stuff, I'm happy how it turned out.
Well, that's always going to go on. I think that, with writers, I've always had that where you look back at an older book and you can always see things that you would do different because you grow, period, as you live through your life. You just kind of keep getting more and more. So that's going to be a natural.
Oh, definitely. I think we get addicted to editing, and we could at some point we have to sort of set a timer, because if you leave us alone, we'll edit, we'll spend years and years and years in editing something to death.
Yeah, you talked about that art show and your art background. Art's a theme of the book. Is that correct? That's an underlying storyline?
Yeah, basically, I guess the primary figure in my book is kind of a low rent PI. She's an ex LAPD officer. And, she had an accident which led to a pill addiction, and she's kind of at a low point, and she gets hired to look into the suspected suicide of a famous artist. And so that kind of leads her down a trail of various criminal activity with art forgery and a lot of other things.
Did you have to do extra art forgery research, even though you had an art background?
I did. I definitely did a lot of research on the forgery end of things, kind of like the technical side of things, and also I wanted to kind of get a better sense of how different players would respond in the art world. I was sort of interested in the idea of like how common this is and how easy it is to get away with it. So that part was definitely a lot more research.
Well, how common is it? Is it something that it happens a lot?
Yeah, I think it also kind of depends on the time period. It's also a lot easier to catch with older art, because as different paints and different techniques that were used in one era are a lot more easy to detect forensically. So I was kind of interested in creating a scenario of forging a contemporary artist where it would be a lot harder to trace, because you don't have the same scientific ways of figuring out whether something is what it's purporting to be.
Now, Kate Myles. Okay, that's kind of the detective you're talking about, or the ex-detective that hurt herself, and now she's a PI.
Yep, that's the main character.
So who is Kate?
So she worked for LAPD for a long time. She was a homicide detective, and then she has an accident, and it basically causes her to lose her family, and she ends up quitting her job. And when I was writing her, I was really interested in kind of the idea of somebody who has something happen that basically completely changes the way they see themselves and kind of changes the kind of aspects of their life that form their identity. Because we all, we think of ourselves as a writer. You might think of yourself as a cop if that's your profession, and you think of yourself as a mother, and kind of what happens when all of that is kind of stripped away and a person has to kind of rebuild themselves from scratch. So I was really interested in exploring that with her, and I was also kind of really interested in looking at her as an imperfect mother, and kind of in crime fiction in particular, there's a lot of terrible fathers, and terrible fathers always get away with it, and it's fine, and we're like, okay, well, he's down and out, and then we kind of have a double standard with mothers, where they either have to be in fiction, they're a monster, or they're put on a pedestal. And I was thinking a lot about kind of Ted Lasso during the pandemic, where like if you replaced him with a female character, and you had a female character who was so adorable that they had a midlife crisis and moved across the world to a job they were unqualified with and left their kid behind, people would be jumping down their throat. Like that would not fly. So I wanted to, I was interested in kind of having a character who is, ultimately a good mother, but not a perfect mother, and is kind of struggling with that and kind of, pushing a little bit on that double standard.
So did you start with her and her imperfections, or did you start with the forgery art plot? What came first, the character or the setting, the plot? I
think I bet definitely the characters. I'm definitely not an outliner. I kind of take it one chapter at a time. So I thought a lot. So Kate and Margot kind of took center stage, and I was kind of trying to build them as I went. And so, yeah, for Kate, I was thinking about, where she was in this point of time, what were her struggles. And then for Margot, I didn't want to just kind of have a stereotypical, character where she, just kind of alluding to the fact that she makes art, alluding to the fact that, she's a little bit unstable. I wanted to kind of build her as a complete person and think about, what would her art look like? Who was she looking at? Who were her influences in that world? And then, and I was interested in trying to figure out how maybe some of Margot's more insane art projects could be kind of built into the plot, and maybe, whether I could kind of blur the line between art and crime, which I don't want to go too much into without having some spoilers. But I have definitely kind of conceived of the characters and tried to imagine them as three-dimensional people before I started putting the book together.
Now, with Kate, again, how do you experience your character like that? Like, do you consider her to be close to you, a family member? Do you hear voices? Do you see it like a movie? How does that work for you when you've got a main character?
I wouldn't say that I consider her as a family member, but I would say that I probably have a lot in common with her in terms of personality structure. She's very disorganized, which in organizational is not my strong suit. She's got some self-doubts, issues. I would say that I empathize a lot with her. But I was also, very conscious of the fact that I wasn't writing myself. There was definitely certain parallels in my life, I think, in some ways, in that, when I was writing about a person who was feeling very displaced, and I was writing at a time where I was, semi-locked in my house for all kinds of reasons. So I think she was probably somebody who I empathized with a lot, but I was also conscious that I wasn't her. I could never be a police officer, in part just because I'm extremely unbrave and I hate working out. So, even just on that kind of superficial level, she would have been a very different person from me, and I needed to kind of factor that in.
The addiction part of that, was that hard for you to research and kind of get into and write about as one of your characters?
That was definitely something that I did a lot of research on. I mean, it was a topic that I had on my mind. I do have someone in my life who has struggled a lot with addiction. And that was also a reason that I wanted to make sure that this was a more nuanced character. And I think also that was one of the reasons I was a little bit interested in bringing that element into her character, was also for creating the sense of displacement. This was a person who was involved in law enforcement, and who had, probably had some very negative ideas about addiction before circumstances led her down this kind of dark path. And so it's another element where she's kind of reconciling with who she is and where she wants to go from here. But that was definitely, I did a lot of reading on my own and tried to make her seem as authentic as possible.
Yeah, I was going to say, because it's a pretty intense subject when someone's addicted enough that they're losing their job and losing a lot of stuff, going through that turmoil. So to get into the head of someone like that and to try and write that character, I would say would be to make it real. You have to really put a lot of work into it.
Yeah, and I also kind of wrote her when she was on the mend. So when her story picks up, she's turned a corner. She's put a lot of work in. Her issue had been chronic pain from an accident. So she's had surgery, and she's basically trying to pick herself up off the floor and bring herself back into a place where she can get custody of her daughter again. So that was something that was a challenge to write, of, somebody who's trying to, put in this Herculean effort to get back to where they were and kind of create a healthy new normal, but is still fighting with their demons.
Is that one of the major themes of the book, is people overcoming the obstacles that confront them?
I wouldn't say so. Margot didn't, she's dead. But I think for Kate, I think that probably just just kind of, rebuilding and trying to kind of create a new normal is kind of a big theme of her character. But I wouldn't say that that's necessarily a theme of the book as a whole.
Well, do you have an underlying subtext then? That even came out organically as you were writing it? Like at the end of the book, when someone reads it, are they just going to get the pulse-pounding tapestry of secrets and retribution or an action, or are they going to pick up something?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot. I think there's a lot about revenge. I think there's a lot about there's actually a lot about kind of authenticity, and there were some kind of nerdier themes that I was thinking about, in terms of like the art portion of the book. So I think you could kind of read it either way. You could kind of read it with more of an interest in the book as an exploration of the art world and different themes in contemporary art. And I think you could also read it as a thriller. And I think they both kind of coexist.
Are you thinking of turning this into a series or having your character show up in another book?
Yeah, I'm probably 2/3 of the way through with the sequel. So that's been fun. It's a very different book. And I'm taking Kate in a very different direction with a different setting. So yeah, ideally I would definitely like to take it into a series.
So is Kate running a children's school or something, or?
No children's school. She's still doing the PI thing, but I think she's probably in a somewhat healthier place.
What's your writing structure like? Like, when you sit down to write, like you have these ideas, can you just fly off and write on a whim, no problem?
I wouldn't say no problem. I would say I do it kind of in spurts, and then I take a break. But I guess right now, I think just because of timing, I work full time and I have a toddler. So, writing it's very much jumping on the opportunity. It's like, he's napping. All right, where's my computer? And then of course he'll wake up 15 minutes later. But, so I think just kind of by necessity, I kind of have to just jump on my computer and start furiously typing, until, the next responsibility kind of takes over.
Your main characters are female. How did you find difficulty, or how did you get in the heads of the male characters? I ask the same question when I'm going from male writers or to have female leads. How do you get into the mind or the reality of the opposite sex?
I don't think I really found that a challenge. Like, I don't feel like my gender is a major component of my identity. It's kind of just a happenstance. So yeah, I wouldn't say that was really a major factor for me. I think like my first book that's not published, my main character was male, and I really didn't find that harder to write. I think if anything though, writing female characters, I think right now it's kind of an opportunity, because in recent fiction there's been such an explosion of complicated female characters that are less kind of simplified and archetype driven. And I think there's a lot of opportunities to kind of explore that and create characters that really didn't exist as much in fiction, 20 years ago. But I don't know if I necessarily find women easier to write.
Well, who do you read?
Well, a lot of mysteries, but I'm kind of all over the place right now. But probably in terms of my writing, I would say that Tana French probably influenced me the most. In part because she's who I picked up when I was sort of trying to teach myself how to write, as like this is a superb craftsman, and I want to sort of see how she does it. But I definitely read a lot of mysteries, definitely read a lot of thrillers.
So what do you think you've learned from publishing, doing this book?
Well, it's definitely been an interesting process. I mean, even I think the editing process has taught me a tremendous amount. Like my editor she's brilliant, and just from Twitter she has a small cult following. But having I think probably the most exciting part of publishing is just having really talented people look at your work and then give you constructive feedback. So that's been pretty amazing. What do
you like best about writing?
I'm trying to think how to answer that question. Just kind of when that kind of feeling of just creating a world when everything starts to come together, like creating a character, and that character starts to have a voice, and then that person starts to do something. I think probably, when in that initial flow, I think before you start editing, when you realize that you're kind of onto something, that's very exciting.
What advice would you give to someone that was in your place? They have a book in a drawer somewhere and they've never made the move to try and publish something. What would you tell them to do?
Well, I would say, first of all, you have nothing to lose. If it's in your drawer now, if you don't try, it's still going to be in your drawer. But I would also say be really strategic, and then go in without being afraid of rejection, because you're going to get a ton of it. And I think I'm in kind of a weird position where I submitted to like oodles of literary agents, and, you know, I got some no's, I got some, silence. One person rejected me 3 years after I submitted it. And in the meantime, I'd written another book and a half. So that was interesting. But I think, and then I ultimately just submitted directly to a publisher, and that worked out. But, I think, I would say probably if you're going to try this for the first time, don't look for, this is kind of the opposite of what people usually tell you, but I would say, don't look at it like you're trying to find a husband when you're looking for an agent, or if you're looking for a publisher. Go for the multitude. Apply everywhere. Send it to a million people, and then you only need one person to give you a yes.
Yeah, that's all it takes. What do you think you're going to be doing in a long period of time here? Do you think you try to do a different type of genre in writing, or are you going to kind of stick to this?
I think ultimately I'd like to do at least a couple more with this character. I think that there's a lot of potential. And I'm definitely very interested in staying within the genre. I like the structure that kind of comes with it. People always get interested when there's a body. So I think, at least for the time being, I think I would want to stick with mysteries and thrillers. But I think there's definitely certain subgenres that I wouldn't mind dipping my toes into.
You're writing a sequel and you want to write more. How are you approaching those sequels? You're starting with how you want your main characters to develop, or you want the story once again?
I think it's both. I think in terms of my main character, I'm thinking about like the arc that her life would be taking, and trying to make that feel authentic, and not just kind of erase everything that happened in the first book. But, then separately, there's the case that she's investigating, and I'm thinking about how the people involved in that case would operate. So I'm sort of kind of trying to weave it together. And as she's working on that case, she's also dealing with her own stuff.
So how many people have you written about that you knew?
I don't know if I should admit that.
Well, I mean, do you let's get the details. I want names, age, phone numbers. No, what exactly happens in when you see these characters? Sometimes they're people you know, and sometimes they're people you've seen, I imagine, in a bookstore or a grocery store, or who knows, character. And do you end up using some of them?
Oh, all the time. Yeah, I think for Kate, I was a DA for 5 years, and there were some just, really cool, amazing female police officers who I interacted with all the time. So, I think on a larger scale, not like in terms of the nitty gritty, but I definitely would kind of think about some of those people and think about how they might react to a situation. I think, and then the art world aspect of things, there are some characters who are very inspired by people who I've encountered. There's one scene in the book where there's a character who's dealing with a sadistic art professor. That sadistic art professor is very inspired by two people who I had taken an art class with, just who are kind of a mashup. Or I had worked in an art gallery briefly after I graduated from college. And I think that was especially, I think, informative for this book, because I worked there right when the Great Recession started. And I was, really young, and within like a month, I went from making, more money than I'd ever thought I'd make in my 20s to making nothing. And I kind of saw the dark influences of watching the economy collapse on the people who were involved in working in this gallery. And so I kind of thought back on some of the people who I met during that experience, and those definitely informed a lot of the characters in the book.
Well, what did you like to write better, your Kate or the sadistic art person?
It's different, I think. It definitely had fun writing the art characters, but I think I would try not to be too self-indulgent. I think even like one of the sadistic art professor, like I took a class once, which I dropped after one session, where the professor was like a clown fetishist, and he made us listen to this music that was like it was like Barnum and Bailey's meets porn. And then we had to draw this woman in a clown mask. And initially I started putting that in the book, and my husband read the draft and he's like, okay, you got to scale this back. I realize that this happened, but this is a little self-indulgence. People are going to think it's over the top. So that was, I kind of had to work on that a little bit. And then I think Kate it's just kind of a different kind of challenge when you're writing a large number of chapters from one person's perspective, and you want to make sure that you kind of explore all the different things that would be going through their mind, and make sure that they kind of feel like a flesh and blood person, and not too much just like a vehicle for telling the story.
Were there any surprises for you, like in doing this, especially with art and you being in the art world so much, but when you were actually putting the book together and stuff, was there anything that kind of you learned from it?
From just the process of putting a book together?
Yeah.
I mean, just learning how to put a book together. I think that I think is probably the biggest thing that I learned. And, if I think about the book that I didn't publish versus this one, you can, I kind of almost want to go back and like sort of cringe about things about the earlier manuscript, because I think you just have to kind of learn by doing, which is, the one thing they always tell you when you're learning how to write is, show, don't tell. And learning how to give a sense of a person without just kind of, resorting to description. So I think I would say probably the biggest thing I learned is just kind of the process of making a book and what a book should feel like.
That's interesting. So when you're in the middle of the pandemic and there's all of this wild stuff going on and a lot of stress to be dealt with and things like that, does that affect your writing? Does it kind of get in the way, or does it make your writing darker, do you think?
I mean, my writing would be dark. I was the kid who read Goosebumps. Like, I like murder mysteries. I like true crime. There's no scenario where I would be a romance writer, even though I, have the utmost respect. So I don't know if my writing got darker because of the pandemic. I think other than just basically, putting certain themes in my head about, like kind of feelings of dislocation, I think the biggest difference that the pandemic kind of brought was just time. And, which, on the one hand, there were a lot of really dark, difficult things about that time period. But in terms of like time to actually be able to sit down and focus on writing, that was, in some ways a blessing. Yeah,
kind of good and bad. Social media. Are you playing a lot with social media? Do you have a website? Do you like to connect with people that read your books?
Yeah, that's been a new experience. I sort of had a non-active Facebook account that I, never looked at other than to see, who's gotten married and who's had a baby. And since starting this process, I started a Twitter account, and it's actually been a really positive experience. I only had to block, one crazy person. So which probably makes me pretty lucky. But it's actually been really amazing to see just how supportive everybody is of each other. I mean, strangers, they comment on when you're celebrating something, they share each other's work. There really is a huge community, and people who are hugely successful, reaching down and commenting and reaching out, and it's actually I was nervous kind of getting involved because social media gets such a bad rap, but for me, it's actually been a really positive experience.
We're actually connected on Twitter. Did you know that?
Well, there you go.
We're following each other.
That's right. I thought we were.
Yeah. Nice account. Nice and clean.
Yeah.
But you think about the reviews. Do you follow reviews and what people say?
I did at first. I think I was lucky in that for a number of months I basically had exclusively good reviews, and so I had that kind of luxury. And I was like, "Oh, this is great. Let me read another one." And then I got my first total nastygram review, and then I thought, "Okay, it's probably better for my mental health to just kind of check this out." So, yeah, I think at this point I'm trying to just, not read reviews, because I know that I'll sit there and obsess about in a not healthy way.
Alex, you talked about your process and you write when you can, but how has the idea of being a quote unquote writer changed your perspective of yourself and your life?
I have to say it's been really validating. And as I've been, kind of like an amateur artist for my whole adult life, more in the visual sphere, but it is really, there is something really validating about being able to do something in the arts and actually get some attention for it, where it's, taking it outside of the hobby realm. And, I think probably a lot of us have a touch of imposter syndrome. We're, thinking about like, how am I here? How is this happening? But, I think just, I do think that it's certainly for me, like getting something published and getting it out into the world has been very validating.
Heard from a lot of old high school friends. I know that person. I know a writer.
Oh yeah, no, it's been nice. Like people start reaching out who you haven't heard from in a long time, and
I think you're Hemingway. You wrote a book. Yeah. You're Hemingway.
How much of your own life experience have you put into this, into your character, main character, or any of the characters?
I think I would say I put quite a bit of life experience in both of my main characters in this book. I think even just kind of little things like I was hit by a drunk driver in my 20s, and I didn't have Kate's kind of devastating consequences, but just that that experience. I was also very consciously aware that things could have been a lot worse, and so that was something that I had, that it was a factor. I think I also had a kid sort of partway through writing this book. And so, going back and editing things, I definitely made a lot of adjustments, because I think when you don't have kids, you don't totally understand how they affect kind of your daily way of thinking. So I think that was something that changed a lot kind of in the revision phases of this book. And then for Margot, I think the way she thinks about art was very similar to the way that I think about art. Like she talks about certain artists that I like, although there's one or two that I threw in there who I don't like, but she's a character. And then I kind of, I was kind of coming up with the types of projects that she would do, but it was also kind of fun because, I imagined things that I might do if I drew better. I draw okay, but I'm not any kind of art genius. And it was sort of a luxury to be able to have this character who I was writing, who, was this brilliant draftsman and was this art genius. And I could have, little fantasy art projects that, I would, a different version of myself with more talent might have been able to execute. So in terms of the way she kind of thinks creatively and the way that she works in that sphere was, somewhat taken from my personality structure, if not my life.
Well, let's stick with think creatively. I know your husband cut out the crazy clown professor after you read it, but as you're writing, did you ever say, I need to not write this given the time, date? Now, I don't want to say cancel yourself, which is too easy a phrase, but were there times you wrote and say, you know what, I don't think I should include this in the book. Something will happen, someone's not going to like it. It may be misinterpreted. Did I ever come about as you were writing?
Oh, definitely. I think, especially on the revisionary phase, I think I have one character who's very unattractive. He's kind of a villain, and he said some pretty awful things where I kind of went back and I wanted to convey the sense that this person is a bit of a bigot and this person is obviously not an attractive character, but I think it's also important to be conscious of the fact that that people read things and people come from all different experiences. And I think that it's important to kind of walk the line between writing something that's authentic and not over sanitizing. But if you can convey that same message and if you can create the same character without including, certain words or, certain exchanges that some people could find really triggering, I think it can make sense to go for the slightly more sanitized route, as long as you're not losing any kind of authenticity. So there were a couple specific things where I kind of went back and I thought, okay, maybe I can phrase this differently.
Are you kind of applying that now to the draft of your next book in advance? Are you thinking about that more as you're writing the first draft?
Yeah, I think I'm thinking a lot about it with the first draft. I have a character who struggles with a lot of issues, a lot of mental issues, a lot of other issues, and I think I've definitely been thinking a lot about how to convey this person's problems in a way that's not completely insensitive and also that's multidimensional. I think one thing that I think that one thing that can be harmful is to basically put a character out who a lot of people might identify with, but who you kind of overly simplify. And I think that's in some ways just as dangerous as describing something in an insensitive way. I think if you put somebody out who really should have the potential to be multidimensional and to really talk about a lot of things, but they come out as just kind of like an outline or a caricature, I think that can also be harmful.
So is there anybody that you knew in your life that you wanted to be killed in your book?
You always ask that question.
I do, because because when I get the yeses, I'm fascinated when someone goes, "Yeah, there's this person that," and I think that's great. So,
I would say there's plenty of people in my life. I would love.
Way to go, Al.
To take people off. I mean, without going into detail, I think there's one person in my life who I would love to make a villain, and that's not pragmatically possible. But if circumstances ever change, that person is 100% going in a book with as many nasty characteristics as I can include.
Does your husband know?
Oh, he's well aware.
Yeah, I thought maybe it'd be him.
No, I've been very lucky. My husband's very indulgent and helps me find stolen hours to write. So I can't complain on that front.
Well, that's actually a good question then. You're asked the same thing. Tell me about the support network that you have behind you as you're writing. The husband helping you with time. Anybody else you reach out to? Anything else you've done to help you in your new endeavor? Yeah,
well, time is kind of the biggest factor, I think. So, my husband and my mother-in-law has also been incredibly helpful in watching the baby. I think just, finding days to go back and do some editing. He goes and stays with his grandmother, or, my husband will take him to the park so I can steal some hours to write here and there. And that's just been so critical. And I have a couple trusted friends who I'm able to show drafts to and get honest feedback. And that's I actually love criticism, not like the nasty internet stuff of like, this is the worst thing I've ever seen, but the helpful stuff of like, maybe you can expand on this, maybe you can change this. So like just being able to show that to people and get honest feedback and make something a better finished product is really a luxury.
So how do you know when a book is good?
I think for me, I think believing what the characters are doing is really important. And I think to me, like the thing that's like my biggest pet peeve, if a character who you're invested in suddenly does something and you're just like, nope, not going to happen. No way. And, obviously there's room for everybody gets a little bit of license because we have to tell a good story, but there's, kind of a threshold. So I think, having books that are full of characters that you don't completely expect and who are unpredictable, but also believable. I think that's when a book gets really exciting. And for me, kind of the holy grail in the thriller world in terms of what I think is probably the hardest to write. And also some of the most exciting books are where you have a whole thriller that's just kind of based on the personality and the interactions of two people, and they play off of each other. So when that's done well, I think that can be really excellent.
Yeah, a little harder to do. It would be a little bit more. You really have to explore the characters much deeper. And
I think that the best books come from that. And then, obviously there are other books where sometimes you read a book where you're like, oh my God, this plotting, it's so brilliant. It's like a master class. I want to just like, make everybody in writing school go read this right now. So I guess those are kind of the different ways, I guess, that a book can really be brilliant. But for me, I think probably the ones that really grab me are the ones where I'm really invested in a character, but also kind of surprised by and not expecting what they're going to do next.
Yeah. It's nice to have something that you don't expect. Wow. Okay. So let's talk about your website and stuff. Where do they find you?
Yeah, well, I'm on Twitter. It's just Alex Kenna 9. And then I have a website. It's just alexkenna.com. Although I built it myself, so it's pretty bare bones at the moment. And those, yeah, I have also on Facebook, although I'm probably more active on Twitter.
Hey, so anybody you'd want to work with?
What do you mean work with?
Any writers out there that you liked or that you do like, and you kind of think, wow, that would be cool. I'd love to work with this person.
Like to do a collaboration?
Yeah, to a book together or a story.
I think probably not. I think I'm too protective. I guess my story, I think I'd want to be in control. I mean, there are writers who I'm like I totally fangirl about, who I think this person's amazing. I just want to pick their brain and, try to write exactly like them. But I don't think I would want to do a book with them. I would more want to, be like in a writer's group and get their help and how to figure out how to make something better. But I think I'm kind of a one-woman operation.
Control freak.
A little bit.
Don't let anything in, stuff like that. That's cool. Well, there you go. Well, it's certainly been an interesting pleasure speaking with you. And the book we're talking about is What Meets the Eye. It's a mystery, and it just came out here in December 6th. So the guest is the author, Alex Kenna. So thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been lovely.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the House of Mystery radio show. To find out more about our guests, hosts, or shows, go to www.houseofmystery.com.
Show's over for now.
Was it as good for you as it was for me?
Yeah. Good night.
This has been a production of Something Weird Media.
I'll be back.